"Babe, I need you to move your things into the guest room by tonight. Sarah needs the southern exposure for her recovery." The sentence hung in the air of the immaculate kitchen, heavier than the humidity of a stagnant July afternoon. It wasn't a question, it was a directive. Elena froze, her hand hovering over the anniversary roast she had spent 4 hours braising. The rich scent of rosemary and red wine suddenly turned nauseating. She looked at Francis, her husband of exactly 3 years as of today. He wasn't looking at her, though. He was busy adjusting the thermostat, ensuring the climate was perfect for the woman shivering theatrically on their beige linen sofa. Sarah, the first love. The one who got away and then came back last week with a vague, tragic autoimmune condition that apparently required 600 thread C-ounce Egyptian cotton and the best view in the city to cure. "Did you hear me, Elle?" Francis turned, his handsome face marred by a frown of impatience. "The doctor said natural light is crucial for her vitamin D levels. Our bedroom has the best windows, it's just temporary." Just temporary, like the temporary loan she gave him to start his tech firm, like the temporary pause on her own design career so she could manage his life. "Francis," Elena said, her voice terrifyingly calm, "today is our anniversary." Francis had the grace to look briefly uncomfortable, scratching the back of his neck. "I know, honey, and happy anniversary. But look at her." He gestured to the living room where Sarah sat, wrapped in a cashmere throw that definitely belonged to Elena. Sarah offered a weak, apologetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I feel terrible, Ellie," Sarah called out, her voice a breathy whisper. "I told Francis not to bother you. I can sleep on the couch, really. My back can take it." "Nonsense," Francis cut in, rushing to her side to tuck the blanket tighter. He looked back at his wife with a look that said, "See, she's a saint, don't be the villain. Elena doesn't mind, she's tough. She's not fragile like you, Sarah. She is tough." That was the moment. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was the quiet click of a lock snapping shut. The love Elena held for this man, a love that had weathered his startup failures, his temper tantrums, and his emotional unavailability, didn't just fade, it evaporated. Elena untied her apron. She folded it neatly and placed it on the marble counter. "You are right, Francis," she said, smoothing down her skirt. "I am not fragile." Francis sighed, relieved. He clearly interpreted her lack of screaming as submission. "Thanks, babe, you're the best. Just pack a few bags for the week. We can move your vanity later." He turned his back on her to pour Sarah a glass of filtered water. He didn't see the look on Elena's face. It wasn't resignation. It was the cold, clinical assessment of an architect realizing a building is structurally unsound and needs to be demolished. Elena walked up the floating staircase, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. She entered the master suite. Her sanctuary. This was the room she had designed. She had picked the paint color, a soothing slate blue. She had sourced the vintage rug from a trip to Morocco they took when they were supposedly happy. She didn't pack a few bags for the week. She pulled out the large hard-shell suitcases from the back of the walk. In closet, she bypassed the casual wear and went straight for the essentials. The jewelry she had bought for herself, the portfolio of sketches she hadn't looked at in 2 years, the deed to the lakeside property she had inherited from her grandmother. The one Francis always forgot was in her name only downstairs. She could hear the murmur of their voices. Francis was laughing, a low, intimate sound she hadn't heard directed at her in months. She packed with efficiency, not emotion. Tears were for women who had hope, and Elena had none left. She stripped the bed, not out of spite, but because she'd be damned if Sarah slept on her sheets. She left the mattress bare, a blank slate. 30 minutes later, Elena walked downstairs. She was wearing her favorite trench coat and carrying 2 large suitcases. Francis looked up from the sofa, confused. "Oh, that's a lot of stuff for the guest room, Elle. There's barely any closet space in there." Elena stopped at the front door. She looked at the man who had promised to love her in sickness and in health, currently fluffing a pillow for another woman. "I am not going to the guest room, Francis." He blinked. "What? Don't be dramatic. Where are you going? Your parents' place." "Number, then where?" His voice rose, tinged with that familiar annoyance he used whenever she stepped out of line. "Sarah needs peace and quiet, Elena. Don't start a scene right now." "There is no scene," Elena said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a simple silver band, her wedding ring. She placed it on the entry table with a soft clink. Beside it, she placed a thick manila envelope. Most men, like Francis, bank on female hysteria. They rely on your tears to validate their importance, and your screaming to paint you as the unreasonable one. Elena denied him that satisfaction. She didn't throw the vase, she threw the deed. There is nothing more terrifying to a narcissist than a woman who packs in silence. She realized that arguing with a man who moves his mistress into your marital bed is beneath her tax bracket. She didn't leave because she was weak. She left because she was the landlord. And landlords don't argue with squatters. They simply change the locks. "What is that?" Francis stood up, the water glass forgotten in his hand. "The guest room is lovely, Francis. You should be very comfortable there. I ask you to do one favor for a sick friend, and you walk out." Francis huffed, shaking his head in disbelief. "You characterize everything as a personal attack? You know, you're being incredibly selfish." Elena opened the heavy front door. The cool evening air rushed in, smelling of rain and freedom. "Happy anniversary, Francis," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I left a gift in the envelope. I think you'll find it liberating." "Elena, if you walk out that door, don't expect to come crawling back when you realize you can't pay for that latte lifestyle of yours," he shouted, his ego finally bruised. "You need me." Elena didn't look back. She didn't slam the door. She closed it firmly with a definitive thud that echoed through the house. She walked to her car, a sleek sedan she had paid for in cash 2 years ago, and slid into the driver's seat. As the engine purred to life, she glanced at the house one last time. Through the large picture window, she saw Francis picking up the envelope she had left. Inside were the divorce papers she had drawn up 6 months ago when she first suspected he was emotionally checking out, but never had the heart to sign. Tonite, the signature at the bottom was fresh, the ink barely dry. As she pulled out of the driveway, her phone buzzed with a notification from the smart home security system. "Front door locked." "It certainly is," she whispered to herself, and merged onto the highway, not checking her rearview mirror once. Francis sat at the kitchen island, staring at the thick packet of papers Elena had left behind. He hadn't actually read them yet. He was too busy being annoyed. In his mind, this was just elaborate theatrics. Elena was a nester. She didn't leave. She threatened. She withdrew, but she always stayed to fold the laundry. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" Sarah called from the living room, her voice trembling just enough to be endearing. "I feel so guilty. Maybe I should go to a hotel." "No, don't be ridiculous," Francis called back, shoving the envelope into a junk drawer. "Elena is just hormonal. She's probably halfway to her mother's condo in New Jersey by now. She'll be back tomorrow when she realizes she forgot her moisturizer." He couldn't have been more wrong. Elena was not in New Jersey. She was currently standing on the balcony of the penthouse suite at the Obsidian, the most exclusive residential building in the city's financial district. The wind whipped her hair back as she looked out over the skyline. a sprawling grid of lights that usually made her feel small. Tonight, however, she felt like she owned it. Technically, she did own a part of it. 3 years ago, Elena had committed the ultimate act of rebellion against her overbearing dynastic family. She married for love, or what she thought was love. She had hidden her last name Sterling, as in Sterling Industries, and introduced herself simply as Elena, a freelance graphic designer. She wanted to be chosen for her heart, not her trust fund. She had spent 3 years playing the role of the supportive wife to a struggling tech entrepreneur. She clipped coupons, she cooked, and quietly, invisibly, she had injected capital into Francis's failing startup through shell companies, making him think he was a genius who had finally caught a break. "Miss Sterling." Elena turned. A silver-haired concierge stood at the door, holding a bottle of 1982 Bordeaux. "Your usual, madam. Welcome home. We've missed you." "Thank you, Charles," Elena said, taking the glass. The wine tasted like velvet and vindication. "Please activate the scorched earth protocol on my personal accounts, effective immediately." Charles didn't blink. He knew exactly what that meant. "As you wish. Shall I cancel the authorized user cards first?" "Yes," Elena said, taking a slow sip. "Especially the Platinum Amex." Back in the suburbs, the atmosphere was less sophisticated. "Francis, it's getting a little chilly in here," Sarah complained gently. "Do you think we could turn the heat up to 74? "Of course," Francis said, pulling out his phone to adjust the smart thermostat. He frowned. The app was grayed out. "Access denied, administrator override." Weird, probably a glitch. He walked over to the manual dial on the wall, locked. "Strange," he muttered. "I'll fix it later. Hey, why don't I order us some comfort food? There's that insanely expensive sushi place you used to love in college on me." Sarah brightened instantly. "Oh, Francis, you shouldn't. But maybe just a few rolls." Francis smiled, feeling the familiar rush of being the provider, the hero. He pulled up the delivery app and ordered $200 worth of sashimi. He didn't blink at the price. His company had just closed a Series B funding round, or so he thought. He hit place order. Processing. Payment declined. Francis frowned. He tried again. Payment declined. Contact issuer. It is truly fascinating how quickly the man of the house crumbles when the actual breadwinner cuts the Wi-Fi. Francis genuinely believed his genius was funding his lifestyle. Unaware he was living on a scholarship provided by his wife's patience, the moment the card declines is the moment the mask falls. He blamed the algorithm, the bank, the weather, anything but his own mediocrity. Ladies, keep a separate account. Not for secrets, but for the day you need to remind him that the sushi, the heat, and the roof over his head are not rights. They are subscriptions, and subscriptions can be canceled. "Damn bank algorithms," he muttered, forcing a laugh. "They probably think my card was stolen because the order is so big." He pulled out his backup card, the one linked to the joint account he shared with Elena, declined. A cold bead of sweat trickled down his back. It wasn't just the credit cards. He opened his banking app. The joint savings account, which had a healthy 6-figure balance yesterday, now read $0. There was a memo attached to the withdrawal. Return of capital investment. Sterling Trust, LLC. His stomach dropped. He didn't know what Sterling Trust was, but he knew that money was the down payment for the new office space he was signing for on Monday. Francis. Sarah's voice was losing its sweetness. "Is the food coming? My blood sugar is terrified of dropping." "Just a second." Francis snapped, louder than he intended. Panic, hot and prickly, climbed up his throat. He needed to call Elena. She handled the finances. She must have moved the money to a high-yield account or something without telling him. Yes, that was it. She was trying to scare him. He dialed her number, his thumb hitting the screen aggressively. Ring, ring, pick up, damn it, he hissed, pacing the kitchen floor. Pick up and stop playing games. In the penthouse, Elena's phone buzzed on the glass coffee table. She glanced at the caller ID, Francis' husband. She reached for it, but a large tanned hand got there first. Edgar sat on the opposite sofa, legs crossed, looking like a spread in GQ magazine come to life. He was 38, with eyes the color of espresso and a jawline that could cut glass. He was the family's fixer, their most trusted legal counsel, and the man Elena had avoided for 3 years because he saw right through her. "Let me," Edgar said. His voice was deep, a rumbling baritone that vibrated through the room. Elena didn't object. She just swirled her wine. Edgar swiped the screen and brought the phone to his ear. He didn't say hello. He just listened to the breathless, angry voice on the other end. "Elena, finally, what the hell is going on with the accounts? I'm trying to order dinner and everything is declined. You need to stop this childish behavior right now and transfer the funds back before I actually get mad. Are you listening to me?" Francis's voice was tinny and frantic. Edgar waited a beat, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. "She's busy," Edgar said, his tone flat and bored, as if he were dismissing a telemarketer. On the other end of the line, Francis froze. "Who is this? Where is Elena?" "She's currently indisposed," Edgar replied. His eyes locked on Elena, who was watching him with a faint, amused smile. "And as for the accounts, I'd suggest you check the fine print of the startup loan you signed 3 years ago. The grace period ended tonight." "Put my wife on the phone?" Francis shouted, the panic now fully audible. "Who the hell are you?" Edgar chuckled, a dark, low sound. "I'm the guy advising her to change her number." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the cushion. "He seems upset," Edgar noted dryly, reaching for his own glass of scotch. "Something about sushi?" Elena laughed, a genuine, full-throated laugh that felt like oxygen entering her lungs for the first time in years. He hates it when he can't buy the applause. "Well," Edgar raised his glass in a toast. He's about to find out exactly how expensive applause actually is. The house felt wrong. It wasn't just the silence, though that was deafening now that the hum of Elena's seamless household management had ceased. It was the physical decay. In the week since Elena left, a fine layer of dust had settled on the mahogany surfaces. The lush ferns in the foyer were turning brown at the tips. The fridge, once a cornucopia of organic produce and prepped meals, was now a graveyard of takeout containers and expired milk. Francis stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at an overflowing trash can. He'd never realized how much trash 2 people, well, 3 now, could generate. He used to think the garbage just disappeared. Elena had always taken care of it before he even woke up. Francis? Usually sweet, Sarah's voice now grated on his nerves like sandpaper. She was draped on the sofa again, wrapped in 3 blankets. "The Wi-Fi is down. I can't stream my meditation playlist. It's crucial for my stress levels." "I know, Sarah," Francis snapped, running a hand through his unwashed hair. "I'm on hold with the provider. They said the bill hasn't been paid in 2 months." "Well, pay it." She sat up, her frail facade cracking to reveal a petulant frown. "How hard is it to pay a bill?" Francis laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "With what money? Both my cards are maxed out, and the business account is frozen pending an audit by some firm called Sterling and Associates." He still hadn't made the connection. he was too busy drowning. His startup, Nexus Tech, was bleeding cash. Investors were pulling out, citing instability in leadership. He had spent 3 days trying to find Elena, calling her parents, her friends, everyone. They all blocked him. He was beginning to realize just how small his world actually was without her. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena was thriving. She stood in her sun-drenched studio at the Obsidian, pinning fabric swatches to a mood board. Her hair, usually pulled back in a severe practical bun, now cascaded in loose, glossy waves around her shoulders. She wore a silk blouse the color of emeralds and tailored trousers that screamed power. "Are you sure about the velvet for the lounge area?" Edgar asked, leaning against the doorframe. He was watching her work with an intensity that made the air in the room hum. Elena turned, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Velvet absorbs sound, Edgar. It makes secrets harder to overhear. Crucial for a high-stakes negotiation room. Don't you think?" Edgar chuckled, walking over to inspect the sketch. "You are wicked." "I am pragmatic." She paused, her hand hovering over a sketch of a nursery, her expression softened. "Have you seen them today?" Edgar's face transformed. The shark, like lawyer, vanished, replaced by something warmer, something fiercely protective. "I dropped them off at preschool this morning." Leo insisted on wearing his superhero cape. "Maya wanted to bring her entire rock collection, and Noah, well, Noah just wanted to know if Aniel was coming to dinner." Elena's heart squeezed. The triplets. Only Edgar knew the truth. Years ago, before she met Francis, Elena had frozen her eggs as an insurance policy against her family's pressure to marry strategically. She had donated some anonymously to a close friend who couldn't conceive Edgar's late sister. When his sister and her husband died in a car crash 2 years ago, Edgar had become the sole guardian of the children, who were biologically half hers. She had kept her distance out of respect for Edgar's grief and her own complicated marriage. But now there were no barriers. "Tell Noah yes," Elena whispered, touching the sketch. "Tell them all yes, I'll make my famous lasagna." The moment was shattered by the buzzing of Edgar's phone. He glanced at it, his expression hardening back into professional indifference. "It's time," he said simply. Elena took a deep breath. She knew what this was, the 30-day notice. Francis was in the middle of arguing with the power company when the doorbell rang. He threw the phone onto the couch, ignoring Sarah's wince, and stormed to the door. What now? A courier stood there, holding a thick envelope embossed with a silver crest, Sterling and Associates. "Sign here," the courier drawled, popping gum. Francis scribbled his signature aggressively and ripped the envelope open. He scanned the document, his eyes widening with each line. Notice to vacate property. 142 Willow Creek Lane owner, the Sterling Family Trust tenant, Francis Archer, and any unauthorized occupants. Dear Mr. Archer, this letter serves as formal notice that your tenancy at the property described above is hereby terminated. Effective immediately due to violation of the lease agreement clauses regarding cohabitation with non-spousal partners and failure to maintain property standards. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Francis's knees buckled. He actually stumbled back, clutching the doorframe. The house, her house. He thought they bought it together. He remembered signing papers. He remembered God. He remembered Elena saying, "Don't worry about the mortgage, babe. My family helped with the down payment, so the deed is in the trust's name for tax reasons." He had nodded, not listening, too busy celebrating his own genius. Francis. Sarah appeared at his elbow, peering at the letter. "What does vacate mean? We can't leave. The humidity here is perfect for my skin. Francis looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in weeks, he saw the selfishness etched into the corners of her mouth. He saw the way she hadn't lifted a finger to help him while his life imploded. "We aren't leaving," Francis growled, crumpling the letter in his fist. A desperate, delusional plan began to form in his mind. "Elena is doing this," he muttered, his eyes manic. "She's trying to punish me. She thinks I'll fold." He marched back into the living room and grabbed his laptop. He frantically searched for Elena's name online. For days there had been nothing. But today, the algorithm blessed him. A headline popped up on Design Weekly. The return of the heiress, Elena Sterling, to host the annual design gala at the Met. The photo showed Elena looking radiant, powerful, and utterly out of his league. She was smiling at someone off. "Chimera, currently indisposed, huh?" Francis sneered at the screen. "We'll see about that." He turned to Sarah, who was busy buffing her nails. "Get dressed, Sarah. We're going to a party." "A party?" She perked up. "Will there be champagne?" "Oh, yes," Francis said, his voice dripping with venom. "And a hell of a surprise for my wife." The Metropolitan Museum of Art was breathing. It wasn't just the ventilation, it was the collective inhalation of New York's elite. The Temple of Dender was bathed in amber light, transforming the sandstone walls into gold. At the center of it all stood Elena. She wore a gown that could only be described as a weapon. It was midnight blue velvet, structured and strapless, with a slit that traveled dangerously high up her thigh. Around her neck sat the sterling sapphire, a family heirloom that hadn't seen the light of day in a decade. "You look like you are about to purchase a small country," Edgar murmured, appearing at her side with 2 flutes of vintage champagne. He looked devastating in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. Elena took the glass, her fingers brushing his. "Only if the zoning laws are favorable. How are the kids?" "Asleep, though. Noah made me promise to FaceTime you if I saw any real princes." Edgar smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I told him the only royalty here tonight is you." Elena felt a flush that had nothing to do with the champagne. For 3 years she had been told she was too loud, too ambitious, too much. Here, under the high glass ceiling, she was just enough. Miss Sterling, a heavy-set donor, approached, beaming. The retrospective on mid-century modernism, exquisite. "I didn't know you had such an eye." "Thank you, Mr. Vanderbilt," Elena smiled, effortlessly slipping back into the role she was born to play. "I find that good design is all about removing the clutter to reveal the structure underneath." At that exact moment, a commotion erupted near the Egyptian wing entrance. Heads turned. The hush that fell over the crowd wasn't respectful. It was the sharp, predatory silence of people sensing blood in the water. "Don't you know who I am?" A voice echoed, loud and brash, bouncing off the ancient stone. "I'm Elena Sterling's husband." Elena closed her eyes for a brief second, of course. She turned to see Francis pushing past a flustered security guard. He was wearing a suit that she recognized immediately. She had bought it for him for a pitch meeting 2 years ago. It was slightly too tight now, straining at the buttons. Trailing behind him, looking like a deer caught in headlights, was Sarah. She was wearing a beige cocktail dress that was perfectly nice for a garden brunch, but woefully tragic for a black tie gala. She clutched a small beaded purse to her chest, her eyes darting around the room, clearly terrified. "Francis?" Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a wide aisle between them. Francis spotted her and strode forward, a manic grin plastered on his face. He clearly thought this was his movie moment. The grand gesture. "There you are, Elle." He held his arms out wide, ignoring the collective gasp of the socialites around him. We need to talk. This whole charade has gone on long enough. He reached for her. Edgar stepped forward, shifting his weight just enough to put himself between Elena and Francis. He didn't raise a hand, he just existed in the space, a wall of pure, menacing calm. "Mr. Archer," Edgar said, his voice dropping an octave. "You are not on the guest list." Francis stopped, looking Edgar up and down with a sneer. "And who are you?" "The bodyguard." "I am her lawyer," Edgar stated flatly. "And her date." The whisper that rippled through the room was delicious. Francis's face turned a mottled shade of red. "Elena, tell him to back off. I came here to fix this. Look, I brought Sarah." She wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding with the guest room. Sarah squeaked. I just wanted to see the art. Francis said there would be hors d'oeuvres." Elena looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She didn't feel anger anymore. She felt pity. Sarah was just a symptom of Francis's disease, his need to be catered to, his need to be the center of a tragedy. "There is no misunderstanding, Francis," Elena said, stepping around Edgar to face him. She stood a full head shorter than him, even in heels, but she loomed over him emotionally. "You are trespassing, not just in this museum, but in my life." "Don't be dramatic, Elle," Francis hissed, lowering his voice, finally realizing that the phones were out. People were recording. "You are embarrassing yourself. Come home. We can talk about the money. I can forgive you for draining the accounts if you just come home." Forgive her. The audacity was so potent it was almost impressive. Elena laughed. It was a cold, glittering sound. "Francis, look around you," she said, gesturing to the room, to the billionaires and the tycoons and the artists. "This is my world. You were a visitor. A scholarship student who flunked out." She took a step closer, her voice turning to ice. "I didn't drain the accounts to hurt you. I took back my investment. Nexus Tech is insolvent. Francis, I've already contacted the board. They voted to remove you as CEO this afternoon. You would know that if you checked your email instead of trying to crash a party." Francis went pale. You can't do that. I own 51% of the shares through the trust," Elena whispered, intimate and lethal. "I can do whatever I want." Francis looked around. He saw the smirks on the faces of the crowd. He saw the pity in the eyes of the women. He saw the absolute, unyielding stone of Edgar's expression. He looked at Sarah, who was currently trying to take a selfie with a sarcophagus in the background. "Security," Elena said softly. Two large men in dark suits materialized instantly. "Please escort Mr. Archer and his guest to the exit," she instructed, "and give Miss Sarah a gift bag." "She looks hungry!" "Elena," Francis shouted as the guards grabbed his elbows. He struggled, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor. "You need me. You are nothing without someone to take care of." "I don't need a caretaker, Francis," she called out, turning her back on him to face the room. "I'm the architect." As Francis was dragged out, shouting obscenities that echoed off the high ceilings, the room held its breath. Elena took a sip of her champagne. She looked at Edgar, whose eyes were burning with something that looked dangerously like adorations. "Sorry about the interruption," Elena said to the room at large, raising her glass. "Now, who wants to discuss the endowment for the new sculpture garden?" The applause was thunderous. Edgar leaned in close to her ear, his breath warm against her neck. "Remind me never to cross you, Elena Sterling." Elena smirked, the adrenaline singing in her veins. "You're safe, Edgar, unless you try to steal the covers." Edgar's hand found the small of her back, his touch electric. "I wouldn't dream of it." Outside on the damp concrete steps of the Met, Francis stood shivering in the cool night air. Sarah was rummaging through the gift bag the guard had thrust into her hands. "Oh, look, Francis," she chirped, oblivious to his ruin. "Macarons, and a voucher for a facial." Francis stared at the closed, heavy doors of the museum. The golden light spilled out from the windows, warm and unreachable. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Notification, doormat access revoked. Notification, Netflix password changed. Notification, LinkedIn status update. Elena Sterling is now single. He didn't scream. He just sat down on the steps and put his head in his hands. The game wasn't just over. He had never even known the rules. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Francis stood in the lobby of the Nexus Tech building, a glass and steel monument to his own ego. He tapped his keycard against the reader for the 5th time. The little light, usually a welcoming green, blinked a stubborn, judgmental red. "Sir." Francis spun around. The security guard, a man named Marcus, whom Francis had ignored for 3 years, was standing there holding a cardboard box, a single, pathetic banker's box. "Your access has been revoked, Mr. Archer," Marcus said, his face impassive. "I've been instructed to hand over your personal effects. Anything company owned, laptops, tablets, the Herman Miller chair, stays." "This is a mistake," Francis spat. Though his voice lacked the fire from the gala, he felt hollowed out. "I am the CEO. I founded this company." "You founded a concept," a crisp female voice cut in. The elevator doors slid open, and a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped out. It was Linda, the CFO. She had always been quiet, diligent, and terrified of Francis's mood swings. Today, she looked like an executioner. "Linda," Francis breathed, forcing a charming smile that looked more like a grimace. "Thank God, tell Marcus to let me up. We have the weekly stand-up in 10 minutes. "There is no stand-up for you, Francis," Linda said, handing him a thick envelope. The board convened an emergency meeting at 6 a.m. Since the majority shareholder Sterling Trust expressed no confidence in your leadership, and since the forensic audit revealed you used company funds for personal entertainment. She glanced meaningfully at the invoice for the sushi on top of the box. "You have been terminated for cause." "Elena," Francis whispered. "Miss Sterling," Linda corrected. "She also requested I remind you that the non-compete clause you signed is valid for 5 years. Good luck finding a job in tech, Francis." Francis looked down at the box. Inside was a framed photo of him and Elena cracked, a stress ball, and a half-eaten bag of almonds. That was it. 3 years of hustle culture. 3 years of being the visionary. It all fit in a box that cost $2 at Staples. He walked out of the building. The automatic doors hissed shut behind him, sealing his fate. His phone buzzed. It was Sarah, Francis. "The hotel is asking for a credit card for the minibar." "Yours isn't working." "Also, are we still doing brunch?" Francis stared at the text. He typed a reply, his fingers trembling. "Go home, Sarah." He blocked her number. Then he sat on the curb, the cold concrete seeping through his suit pants, and wept. Not for Elena, not for the marriage, but for the loss of the audience. The smell of bacon and brewing coffee was the first thing Elena registered. She opened her eyes, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar ceiling. It was high, with crown molding, painted a soft cream. Then she remembered. She was in the guest suite at Edgar's brownstone. She stretched, her limbs feeling heavy and relaxed in a way they hadn't for years. There was no knot of anxiety in her stomach, no mental checklist of Francis's needs. She wandered out to the kitchen, following the sound of giggles. The scene that greeted her made her breath catch. Edgar was at the stove, flipping pancakes. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that stretched tight across his back, covered by a ridiculous apron that said Grill Sergeant. Sitting at the island were the triplets, Noah, Leo, and Maya. They were covered in flour. Auntie Elle, Noah screamed, sliding off his stool and sprinting toward her. He tackled her legs. Elena laughed, scooping him up. He smelled like maple syrup and baby shampoo. "Good morning, monster. Did you save me any pancakes?" "Uncle Juju made chocolate chip," Maya announced solemnly. "But we can't tell Daddy because he says sugar rots our brains." Edgar turned, spatula in hand. His eyes found Elena's, and the warmth in them rivaled the stove. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "How did you sleep?" "Like the dead," Elena admits, setting Noah down. "It's quiet here. I forgot what quiet feels like." "Quiet is expensive," Edgar joked, plating a stack of pancakes and sliding them toward her, "but worth every penny." He poured her coffee black, 2 sugars, exactly how she liked it. Francis had never remembered how she took her coffee. He always put milk in it, insisting it was better for her gut health. "So," Edgar said, leaning against the counter as the kids devoured their breakfast. "Status report: Francis was escorted out of Nexus 10 minutes ago. Linda sent confirmation. The locks are changed at the house. The movers are packing his things and Sarah's, and sending them to a storage unit in Queens. First month paid. After that, it is on him." Elena took a sip of coffee. "And the divorce? Filed this morning," Edgar said. "Cited irreconcilable differences and financial infidelity. We have a freeze on all marital assets, what little is left of them." Elena nodded. It was done. The demolition was complete. "Do you feel guilty?" Edgar asked quietly. So the kids wouldn't hear. Elena looked at him. She thought about the years of gaslighting. The way Francis made her feel small so he could feel big. The way he used her money to buy affection from other women while she clipped coupons. "No," she said firmly. "I feel clean." "Good," Edgar said. He hesitated, then reached out and brushed a smudge of flour off her cheek. His hand lingered for a second too long, the air between them charged with static. "Because," Edgar murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips, "I have a feeling the rebuilding phase is going to be much more interesting." "Is that a legal opinion, counselor?" Elena teased, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Personal observation," he grinned. 3 days later, Francis sat in a dimly lit office in a strip mall. The sign outside read, "Law Offices of Saul and Proctor. 24 divided by 7 service." Across the cheap laminate desk sat a lawyer who looked like a bulldog in a polyester suit. His name was Morty, and he smelled like cigar smoke and desperation. "So," Morty said, leaning back and lacing his fingers over his stomach, "let me get this straight. Your wife, the secret heiress to the sterling fortune, defrauded you." "Yes!" Francis slammed his hand on the desk. "She lied about who she was. She entrapped me into a marriage under false pretenses. And now she's stolen my company." Morty chewed on a toothpick. "And you say she has a close relationship with her lawyer, the guy who served you?" "Extremely close," Francis sneered. "They were all over each other at the gala." Morty's eyes gleamed. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "Mr. Archer," Morty said, opening a drawer and pulling out a fresh contract, "you don't have a case for the company. The paper trail there is ironclad. She owns you." Francis slumped. But Morty continued, pointing a thick finger at him. "The Sterling family hates scandal. They hate it more than they love money. If we can prove infidelity, if we can prove she conspired with her lover to defraud you of your marital lifestyle," he pushed the paper toward Francis. "We don't go for the company. We go for the reputation. We make it so noisy, so ugly, that they pay you $10 million just to go away. Francis looked at the contract. It was a deal with the devil. If he signed this, he was declaring total war. There would be no going back. He thought about the cardboard box. He thought about Sarah blocking him when the credit cards failed. He thought about Elena, looking like a queen, smiling at another man. He picked up the pen. Where do I sign? The quiet lasted exactly 48 hours. For 2 days, Elena lived in a state of suspended animation. She went to the studio, she played Legos with the triplets, and she drank wine on Edgar's terrace, while the city twinkled below them like a bed of diamonds. On Tuesday night, the air on the terrace was cool, smelling of pending rain and expensive cologne. Edgar stood close to her at the railing, his shoulder brushing hers. "You know," he said, his voice low, vibrating through her arm, "I hated him. From the moment you introduced us at that gallery opening 5 years ago, I shook his hand and thought, this man is a vacuum. He will suck the air out of every room he enters." Elena swirled her Pinot Noir. "You were right. Why didn't you say anything?" Edgar turned to face her, resting his hip against the railing. "Because you looked happy, and because I was just the brother-in-law's friend, I didn't have the standing to tell the sterling heiress she was marrying a fraud." And now, Elena looked up at him. The moonlight softened the sharp angles of his face. "Now," Edgar said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her jawline. "Now I have standing," he leaned in. The kiss wasn't tentative. It was acclaiming a seal on a contract written in years of silent observation. It tasted of wine and inevitability. For a moment, the world was perfect. Then Elena's phone, resting on the rot, iron table, lit up, then it vibrated. Then it began to dance across the glass surface, buzzing incessantly. Edgar pulled back, frowning. "Is that an alarm?" Elena picked it up. Her lock screen was a cascade of notifications. Twitter, Instagram, text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. She opened the first link sent by her PR manager. It was a page 6 exclusive. The Black Widow of Wall Street, how Elena Sterling destroyed her husband to run off with her lawyer. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Oh my God. Edgar leaned over her shoulder, reading the text aloud, his voice hardening with every word. Sources say Frances Archer, the visionary founder of Nexus Tech, was blindsided by a calculated coup. She played the role of the doting wife while funneling my intellectual property to her lover, Archer claims in an exclusive interview. "See below," Edgar muttered, scrolling down. "There is a quote from Sarah. I was just a guest in their home," says Sarah Jenkins, an aspiring lifestyle influencer. Elena was so cold, Francis was suffering. He just wanted someone to talk to, and she threw us both out on the street like garbage. She even kept his almonds. His almonds. Elena choked out a laugh bordering on hysterical. "He told the press I stole his almonds." "It's not funny, Elena," Edgar said, his lawyer mask slamming back into place. "Look at the comments. Number, Justice for Francis number, Etherich number, Sterling scandal. He is playing the victim," Edgar said, pacing the terrace. "He is spinning a narrative that you used your family's money and legal connections. Mito steal his hard work and kick him while he was down. In this economy, he is painting you as the Marie Antoinette of New York tech." "It is a lie," Elena said, her hands shaking. "The audit proves he stole from the company." "The public doesn't read audits, Elena. They read headlines." Edgar grabbed his phone. "I need to call the firm. We need a cease and desist, and we need to draft a defamation suit before morning." But morning came too fast. When Elena arrived at the Obsidian the next day, there were photographers. They weren't the respectful art photographers she was used to. These were paparazzi. They swarmed her car as she tried to pull into the garage. Flashes blinded her. Questions were shouted through the glass. "Elena, did you sleep with your lawyer while Francis was building the company? Is it true you cut off his health insurance? How much is the settlement going to be?" She managed to get inside, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. Her assistant, a young girl named Chloe, was waiting by the elevator with a terrified expression. "Miss Sterling," Chloe whispered, "there is a man in the lobby. He says he has a delivery." "I don't have time for deliveries, Chloe." He wouldn't leave. He sat on the receptionist's desk. Elena marched into the lobby sitting on the sleek, custom-designed reception desk was a short, rotund man in a rumpled suit. He was eating a bagel. "Can I help you?" Elena demanded. The man hopped down, wiping crumbs onto his pants. "Elena Sterling, yes, you've been served." He slapped a thick packet of papers onto her chest. She instinctively grabbed them to keep them from falling. "Civil suit," the man grinned, revealing a poppy seed stuck in his teeth. "Alienation of affection, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud." "Oh, and Mr. Archer is requesting emergency spousal support of $50,000 a month, pending the trial, of course." Elena stared at the papers. $50,000. Plus legal fees, the man added, backing toward the door. "Have a nice day, ma'am. Love the velvet, by the way. Very ominous." Elena stood alone in the lobby of the business she had built from scratch. She felt dirty. Francis was dragging her through the mud, and he was enjoying every second of it. Her phone rang again. It was a number she knew by heart, but one that rarely called her directly. It was the private line of the Sterling Trust Board of Directors, specifically her grandmother, Beatrice Sterling. "Elena," Beatrice's voice was crisp, dry, and terrifying. It sounded like old money and disappointment. "Grandmother," Elena said, straightening her spine, even though no one could see her. "I am looking at a tabloid that features our family name next to the words sex scandal and fraud. The stock for Sterling Industries has dipped 2 points since the market opened." "It is a lie, grandmother, Francis is." "I do not care what Francis is." Beatrice cut her off. "I care that you have allowed a stray dog to bite the hand that fed it. And now the dog is barking for the world to hear." "Silence him, Elena." "I am trying. Edgar is." "Edgar is part of the problem," Beatrice snapped. "The narrative is that you two conspired. You need to distance yourself from him immediately." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "You will step down from the design gala tonight," Beatrice commanded. "You will issue a statement that you are cooperating with an independent investigation, and you will stop seeing Edgar until this is resolved. If you do not, the trust will intervene. And you know we are much less sentimental than you are." The line went dead. Elena looked at the lawsuit in her hands. Then she looked at the glass doors where the paparazzi were still lurking. Francis didn't need to win in court. He just needed to make enough noise to make her family panic. And it was working. He was burning her world down, one headline at a time. She walked back to her office and dialed Edgar. "Elena," he answered on the first ring. "I am drafting the response. We're going to crush him." "Edgar," she said, her voice trembling. "We can't go to the gala tonight." Why, it is your night. If you don't go, you look guilty." "My grandmother just called," Elena whispered. "She wants me to fire you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I see," Edgar said finally. His voice was devoid of the warmth from the terrace. It was the voice of a man assessing a fatal wound. "I am not going to do it," Elena said fiercely. "I am not letting Francis dictate my life anymore." "Elena," Edgar said softly, "if you fight the trust, you lose your funding. You lose the obsidian. You lose everything. I already lost the only thing that made me miserable, she said. I am not losing the good things too. Then we need a new strategy, Edgar said. If they want a show, let's give them a show, but not the one Francis wrote. What do you mean? Don't cancel the gala, we're going. And we're bringing the one thing Francis is terrified of. What is that, the truth? Edgar said darkly. I am calling Linda at Nexus. It is time to release the unredacted audit and the security cam footage from your kitchen. Elena frowned. The kitchen footage. Why? Because, Edgar said. Francis forgot that you installed a nanny cam for the dog 6 months ago, the one that records audio. Elena gasped. She had forgotten. The little camera on top of the fridge. Does it have? It has the night he brought Sarah home. Edgar said, and it has him admitting to his friend on the phone that he married you for the Sterling safety net? Edgar, Elena breathed. That is nuclear. He wanted a war, Edgar said. Let's nuke him. The dress was not a dress. It was chainmail disguised as silk. Elena stood before the floor. To-length mirror in her penthouse. The gown was a shimmering gunmetal gray, high-necked and backless, draping over her body like liquid mercury. It was armor. Your grandmother called again, Edgar said from the doorway. He was buttoning his cuffs, his expression grim. She says if you step onto that red carpet with me, the trust will initiate a vote to freeze your personal assets by morning. Elena applied a coat of blood-red lipstick. She didn't tremble. Let them vote by morning. It won't matter. She turned to him. Do we have the file? Edgar held up a sleek, encrypted flash drive. It is queued up. Linda from Nexus Tech gave me the access codes to the remote server, and I've linked it to the primary projector at the venue. We just need the signal. And the press? Every major outlet is there. Francis made sure of that. He's been giving interviews outside the venue for an hour. He's calling himself the martyr of modern masculinity. Elena laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. God, he really needs a branding consultant. Let's go. The design gala was held at the spiraling epicenter of the Guggenheim. The white ramp spiraled upward like a shell, tonight bathed in the soft glow of aggressive philanthropy. Outside, it was a circus. Flashbulbs popped like strobes in a nightclub, and there, standing on a makeshift podium near the velvet ropes, was Francis. He looked haggard but smug, flanked by Morty the lawyer and a uncomfortable-looking Sarah. He was holding a microphone. And that is why I refuse to be silenced by the Sterling billions, Francis shouted to a cluster of reporters. She thinks she can buy justice. She thinks she can steal my life's work and my dignity. A hush fell over the crowd as a Blacktown car pulled up. Edgar stepped out first, extending a hand. Elena emerged. The silence broke. A roar of questions erupted. Elena, is it true you embezzled Nexus funds? Are you going to settle? Elena didn't look at the cameras. She looked straight at Francis. Francis smirked, lowering his microphone. He mouthed, checkmate. Elena smiled. It was the smile of a predator who knows the trap has already snapped shut. She took Edgar's arm, and together they walked past Francis, past the press, and into the museum. Inside, the air was perfumed with expensive lilies and fear. The elite of New York sipped champagne, eyeing Elena with a mixture of judgment and thrill. She was the evening's entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed. Please welcome the host of tonight's retrospective, the chairwoman of the Obsidian, Elena Sterling. Elena ascended the stage. The massive curved wall behind her was blank. Thank you, she said, her voice steady, amplified through the rotunda. Tonight, We are here to celebrate design, structural integrity, transparency. The idea that a beautiful facade means nothing if the foundation is rot. She saw Francis enter the back of the room. He had used his remaining donor credential, one she hadn't revoked yet, to get in. He strode toward the front, Morty trailing behind him, ready to serve another subpoena in front of the CR fame de la CR family of society. "Miss Sterling," Francis's voice cut through the room. "Is this where you announce your resignation?" The crowd gasped. Security moved forward, but Elena held up a hand. "Actually, Francis," she said into the mic, her eyes locking onto his, "this is where I discuss the concept of surveillance in modern architecture." She nodded to the sound booth. "Roll it." The massive white wall behind her flickered. It didn't show architectural blueprints. It showed a kitchen. Her kitchen, the timestamp lowered in the corner read, "The 14th of October, 11:42 p.m., 3 weeks ago." On the screen, grainy but high definition, Francis walked into the frame. He was on the phone. "Yeah, she's asleep, finally." The voice on the screen was crisp. The audio system of the Guggenheim was state. Of the art, every whisper echoed. "Turn it off," Francis screamed from the floor. "This is illegal. That is private property." "It is my property, Francis," Elena said coldly into the mic. "And in New York, only one party needs to consent to a recording. I consent. If you are going to burn a man's reputation, do not do it in a private email. Do it projected on a 40-foot wall at the Guggenheim." Francis wanted to be the center of attention. Wish granted. Elena didn't just expose infidelity. She exposed the financial parasitism that hurts far more than a physical affair. Using a nanny cam intended for a dog, to catch a rat is poetic justice at its finest. She proved that while he was playing checkers with her heart, she was playing 4D chess with his freedom. Always keep the receipts. Darlings, sometimes they are video files. On the screen, Francis opened the fridge and took a swig of milk directly from the carton. "Bro, you don't get it," the on-screen, Francis laughed. "I don't need the prenup to expire. I've already got the Cayman account set up. I've been siphoning the operating costs from Nexus for 2 years. Elena doesn't check the books. She is too busy playing artist." The room erupted. A collective gasp of horror rippled through the billionaires. "Turn it off." Francis lunged for the stage. Edgar stepped in front of the stairs, arms crossed, an immovable object. The video continued. A woman walked into the frame. "Sarah." "Francis, are you sure?" Sarah asked on screen, leaning against the counter. "She owns the house." "She's a cash cow, babe," Francis sneered, grabbing a handful of almonds. "That is all she is. A little rich girl with daddy issues who thinks I love her. Once the IPO hits, I dump the stock, crash the company, blame it on market volatility. And we retire to St. Tropez. She won't have a dime left of the liquidity." The video cut to black. The silence in the Guggenheim was heavier than the concrete foundation. Elena looked down at Francis. He was frozen. His face was the color of old paper. He looked around, hoping for an ally, but the crowd had physically recoiled from him. The donors, the investors, the press who had sneaked inside, they were all staring at him with unadulterated disgust. He hadn't just cheated on his wife. He had admitted to corporate fraud, embezzlement, and a premeditated con, all in 4K resolution. "Forensic accounting is a beautiful thing, isn't it?" Elena said, her voice soft but lethal. The district attorney received a copy of this footage, along with the unredacted financial records of Nexus Tech, approximately 10 minutes ago. She gestured to the back of the room. Through the glass doors, blue and red lights flashed against the night sky. "Mr. Archer," a deep voice boomed. Two NYPD officers walked onto the floor, flanked by a very smug, looking Linda from accounting. "We have a warrant for your arrest." Francis looked at Elena. "Elle, please. It was just talk, locker room talk." "You are not in a locker room, Francis," Elena said, turning her back on him. "You are in a shark tank, and you are bleeding." As the officers handcuffed Francis, dragging him out past the stunned socialites, the flashes of the cameras went wild. But this time, they weren't aiming for a scandal. They were documenting a slaughter. Elena felt a hand on her waist. "Edgar, the stock just rebounded," he whispered in her ear. "And your grandmother just texted." "What did she say?" Edgar showed her the screen. "Beatrice Sterling, excellent presentation. Very minimalist. The trust withdraws its objection." Elena took a deep breath. She looked out at the room. People were starting to clap. A slow, rhythmic applause that grew into a thunderous ovation. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the one who held the remote. "Shall we?" Edgar asked, offering his arm. "Let's get out of here," Elena said. "I am starving, and I know a place that serves really good pancakes." As they walked out the back exit, leaving the chaos behind them, Elena realized the truth. The empire hadn't been destroyed. She had just completed the renovation. Epilogue: 6 months later, the headline of Forbes magazine lay on the coffee table. "The Phoenix: How Elena Sterling Rebuilt Nexus Tech and Redefined the Prenup." Elena sat on the terrace of the brownstone, watching the sunrise over Central Park. The air was crisp. "Coffee," Edgar said, placing a mug in front of her. "Black, 2 sugars." "Thank you." He sat down next to her, resting his hand on her knee. "The sentencing hearing is today." "I know," Elena said, taking a sip. 5 to 10 years for fraud and embezzlement. Sarah took a plea deal for probation. "Are you going?" Elena looked at the magazine. She looked at Edgar, who looked at her as if she hung the moon and the stars. She listened to the sound of the triplets waking up inside, the chaotic joy of a life that was messy and loud and real. "No," Elena smiled, closing the magazine. "I have a meeting with the architects for the new sculpture garden." And then she leaned over and kissed Edgar. "I have a date." "With who?" Edgar grinned. "My lawyer," she whispered. "I hear he is excellent." Elena Sterling didn't look back. The view ahead was too beautiful to miss. "Let's elevate this. We need to talk about the occupant versus the architect." In this story, Francis was an occupant. He moved into a life Elena built, sat on furniture she chose, spent money she synthesized, and genuinely convinced himself he owned the building. He mistook his proximity to power for power itself. This is a trap many brilliant, empathetic women fall into. We build the stage, set the lights, write the script, and then push a mediocre man into the spotlight, hoping he will eventually act like a lead character. He won't. He will just complain about the catering and invite his fan club into the dressing room you paid for. Elena's power wasn't just her trust fund. It was her realization that she could demolish the building just as easily as she designed it. She stopped trying to fix a foundation that was rotting from the inside. The most elegant revenge is not slashing tires or screaming in the street. It is simply removing your support structures and watching gravity do its job. When you remove the architect, the occupant is just a man standing in the rubble, holding a bag of almonds he didn't pay for. So pour yourself a glass of something expensive, preferably bought with your own money, and tell me, have you ever realized you were the architect of a life someone else was claiming credit for? How did you handle the eviction? Did you change the locks? Or did you Like Elena, simply turn off the lights and walk away. I'll be in the comments, review. Madam, read out.